Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about some things that could potentially make your novels seem poorly written. This is especially useful for any of my first-time writers out there or anyone who's kind of just getting started and getting their feet wet in the novel writing process. As a writer myself, these are some of the things that I notice and I definitely pick up on when I'm reading books that kind of pull me out of the story, and these are some of the things that kind of make me feel like the author maybe wasn't as seasoned as some of the other authors that I've read before. The first thing that I want to talk about, which I'm sure you've heard before, is info dumping. I know, you have all of these great ideas about the world building and the backstory and the religion and the culture, and you've come up with this amazing world in your head, and you just want to share all those details with your readers, right? But the important thing to focus on is how you're sharing those details. For example, if you just have blocks and blocks of paragraphs just like rambling about all of this backstory and things that are not really related to the plot itself, you're 100% going to lose your reader. You need to find a way to kind of weave in those details into the plot and into this character's narrative so that the reader is gaining all of this knowledge, but in a way that kind of flows seamlessly with the actual plot of the story. This definitely takes a little bit of practice, but what I would recommend, try writing your scene without any kind of world building details at all. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, and then find places where you can just sneak in a line here, a line there of kind of backstory or world building or about the culture, and that kind of helps you make sure that you're actually focusing on moving the plot ahead and then just sprinkling in those details in a way that makes sense to the narrative. The second thing that can affect the quality of your writing is if you have pacing issues. For example, when I was first starting out my writing, my chapters were super fast paced, and it was honestly an indicator that I was not spending as much time as needed on the necessary details to make the reader feel really immersed in my book. On the contrary, it can also be an issue if your writing is moving too slowly. If your writing is dragging or you're spending too much time on details that are maybe not as necessary or feel kind of boring to the reader, your reader is going to lose interest. It's definitely a fine line to balance, but something that I find that helps me is when I have one chapter that's super like fast paced and action focused and a lot of things are happening, I like to make sure that the following chapter kind of slows everything down a little bit. It's more of like an interior scene, focusing more on how the characters are feeling and their conversations and their emotions and things like that. So alternating a little bit like that between slow and fast and kind of finding what rhythm works for you helps you make sure that you don't have any pacing issues in your story. The third thing that I would say that can kind of make your readers lose interest in your story is if there's a lack of conflict. In my early writing days, this is something that I really struggled with because I really like to focus on character-driven stories. I just liked writing about character interactions and like dialogue and banter, and all of those things are really great and fun, but they don't keep the story moving. The reader doesn't have a reason to be invested in your main character's journey if there isn't some kind of struggle or conflict or tension along the way. Number 4 is a big one that I see a lot, and that is unrealistic dialogue. I feel like dialogue is one of the hardest things to master and to really make feel natural, but it's so easy to tell when it's done poorly. When the dialogue between characters sounds forced or stiff, or it doesn't sound like how people would talk in real life, it's really easy to tell and pick up on, and it's something that pulls the reader out immediately and makes them think that the story is not well written. One thing that I find helps a lot with this is if you read your dialogue out loud. It's one thing to look at the dialogue on paper and read it in your head. It's really easy when you do that to think that, oh, this sounds totally natural, but when you actually read it out loud or kind of act out the scenes and act out what your characters are saying, you can tell so quickly that this is something that a real person wouldn't say. And last but not least, this one's a little bit of a controversial one maybe, but it's something that I've seen a lot in more recent years with the rise of book talk and social media and having book discussions on social media, over-reliance on tropes. I personally love a good enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers, one-bed trope. We all have our favorite tropes and they're super fun to read about. What I've been seeing more and more is newer writers writing their story around tropes so that their story will fit whatever trope that they want to write about. One, this is something that can kind of hinder the natural flow of your story. Your story is naturally going in this direction, but you're like, oh wait, no, I need to fit in these tropes somehow, so you force it to go this way, and it can kind of just be jarring to the reader and not feel as natural. And 2, it can make your writing feel just a little bit lazy if the only thing that you have to tout about your book is the tropes that are in it. There are so many things that probably make your story unique, And you're doing yourself a disservice if you're just talking about your book and marketing your book based on tropes that can be found in 100 other books. Tropes are great sprinkled in here and there, and I definitely love when I see it in a book and it's actually something that fits in naturally with the story, but it's easy to tell when the book and plot was kind of forced around these tropes to make them fit into the story. So yeah, those are a few things that I found throughout my writing and reading journey that kind of make a story feel like it's not fully finished or properly polished in the way that it should be. And these are things that I try to avoid in my own writing. I just wanted to share them with you guys, and I hope that helped. If you're interested in seeing more videos like this, please subscribe and follow along for more.